morning. Well, hey, if you are joining us for the very first time or for the first time in a long time, we're really grateful that you are here today. In fact, can we just give a huge welcome to all of our first-time guests here? Man, especially if you're the type of person where you're like, I'm not really like a church kind of person, and I don't usually go to church, man, we actually designed today with you in mind because we think about you every single Sunday, the folks that aren't yet here, and I love that we are a place where you can bring people in and there's something for them, and it makes sense. And that's our hope and our heart for you today, that you lean in and that this is beneficial to your life in some very genuine, practical way, and maybe in some deeper ways that you're not aware of. And we are going to continue on in the series that we started way back at the beginning of last month, our longest series of the year. It's this 9-week series called Life Hacks. And essentially, we're going through the book of James, which is written by the half-brother of Jesus. And he's one of the very first Christian pastors. And his whole goal in writing was to really coach people who are like, I want to hang on to my faith, but sometimes I'm confused about like, how do I use faith in my everyday life? Like outside of like chaos or trauma or like a thing where I need to like reach out to God in a pinch, like how do I leverage faith to become the person I want to be in the way that I just do my everyday normal life? And he has a lot of practical insight. And so we just decided to take our summer and sort of pick apart this book and grab out all the life hacks to gift to you. And so each one sort of stands alone. And so if this is your first day here for this series, it will make sense. But I want to encourage you, take some notes today. Write down some things that stand out to you. Take pictures of the slides, whatever works for you. But take something away today to have a conversation about what you're hearing. Even if the conversation is like, I did not like that. What was he wearing? That didn't feel like a real church. I didn't agree with it. Or maybe it's like, how do I apply this in my life today? All that stuff is okay, but you'll have a better argument if you wrote some things down. So if you are taking notes, the title of my message today is A Good Night's Sleep. A Good Night's Sleep. Some of you are like, "Ooh, yes, Jesus, please." This is a question I want to begin with. Have you ever needed sleep because you had so much to do tomorrow, but you can't sleep because you have so much to do tomorrow? Anybody been here? Just the irony of this. And you give yourself that little pep talk in your mind where you're like, you can do this. Tomorrow's a big day. It's the day. There's a lot going on. You need to be at your best. We're going to go to bed early tonight. It's going to happen. And you do. You go to bed and you snuggle down in. And as soon as you close your eyes, your mind just wakes up and is just like, here's 87 things you haven't thought about until now. And it's just spinning off out of control. And you feel like you can't stop it, right? You're just like, well, I can't forget to do that. I got to remember that thing. Like, maybe I should text that person now. Yes, it is 12:30 at night, but like, maybe I should just get it out of the way, right? Should I look for a new vacuum on Amazon right now? Because I feel like ours is acting a little bit weird recently. Am I breathing weird? I feel like I'm breathing weird. I might be coming down with something. This better not be COVID, okay? I cannot be sick right now. I have so many things that I have to do, okay? What is our license plate number? I don't know that I could tell someone if they asked me or my car got stolen. I really have to pee. I wonder if I can hold it for the next 7 hours if I just don't think about it. And then your bladder feels like it's going to explode. And so you get up and you do go to the bathroom and you come back and now you're even more awake because the bathroom floor is so cold on your feet. And so you get back in your bed and you snuggle back down and you toss and turn and you flip over your pillow and you stare at the ceiling for a while and that's not working. And so you're like, you know what? I'm just going to grab my phone just for a couple minutes and just do a little calm down scrolling. And you do, and even though you said it's going to be 2 minutes, 90 minutes later, you've fallen down this research rabbit hole about like cats and the ancient burial rituals in the pyramids of Egyptians and how that interfaces with our life today and the artifacts around our home. And you're like, this is so interesting. And it's not, but you're there now and you can't get out of it. And of course, this isn't working either. You look at the clock and you start doing that sleep math where you're like, okay, it's fine. If I go to bed in the next 5 minutes, I can still get 3.5 hours. And then you look over at it again, you're like, okay, the next 5 minutes, I can still get 2.5. And by the last thing you remember, you see the sun coming up in the curtains and you're trying to will it back down. You're like, no! And you finally doze off, and then your alarm goes off like 5 minutes later, and you're so angry, you like fling your phone across the room as it's going off. And the whole day, you're just like slamming coffee, and you're all grouchy towards people, and you're fighting fatigue, and you just keep telling yourself, all you have to do is survive the day, because we're gonna get home, and then when you get home, it's gonna be fine. You can go to bed early, and you get home, and you snuggle down in your sheets, and as soon as you get comfortable, you're like, well, now I'm awake. I'm wide awake. It's like when I was supposed to be awake, I felt sleepy, and now I'm supposed to be sleepy, I'm awake. What is wrong with me? And maybe this doesn't just happen to you once or twice. Maybe this has been happening for a long time. Maybe it's been weeks or months or years of living this way. And at this point, you've found all the things, right? I mean, you've got a white noise machine in your room and blackout curtains and one of those sleep masks. And you're taking warm baths and doing that weird red light therapy, supposed to turn you into a superhero, I guess. And you're drinking your sleepy time tea, and you do that weird hostage mouth tape that everyone's talking about now, and take the melatonin gummies and rub the oils on your feet and play the whale songs to yourself. None of it's working, right? None of this stuff is actually working, and now everyone thinks you're crazy. And you start to feel crazy, right? I wonder if you have gotten to a place in your life where you were like, I cannot remember the last time I had a good night's sleep. And you don't feel like yourself anymore. You don't act like yourself anymore. You are physically and emotionally exhausted. And at that point, you don't just need rest, you need peace in your life. You don't just need your body to repair itself. You need your mind to actually settle in and calm itself down. But you don't know how to do that. And you feel like you've tried everything, and you're like, what else is there to do? And again, this is not just a new problem for us now. This is something that has existed ever since there were people. In fact, James, when he writes his book, he is writing to one of the first Christian churches, and there's so much anxiety and sleeplessness in those people that he writes to give them some advice about it. And this is what he says to them. This is James chapter 5, verse 13. He says, are any of you suffering hardships? You should pray. How many of you, when you hear that, you're like, oh, is that your genius advice? Oh, real surprising coming from a pastor. Oh, why don't you pray? Yeah, Mr. Spiritual, I know about that already, okay? And yet, here's what's crazy. All of us, when someone's like, hey, you should pray about it, aren't you like, I know I should pray, but also, I kind of don't usually pray. Like, we all know we should, but most of us actually don't, which is why it's something that has to often be said. And we do sometimes, but it's not the first thing we think of, right? It's usually like, I'm going to check this blog and do this thing, get this advice, and try this hack. And when all that stuff fails, we're like, maybe I should talk to God. And I just wonder this morning, what if, how might your entire life be different if prayer was your first response instead of your last resort? I wonder if that would transform anything about the way you experience your life. Now, I don't know what you think about when you think of prayer. Depending on your upbringing, your background, the things that have happened to you or that you've seen. But in its most simplest form, prayer, I would describe it as essentially just inviting God into the conversation. Because here's what's true. All of us have this ongoing dialogue happening inside of our mind at all times. And for most of us, it's pretty self-centered. It can be pretty anxious and nervous. And prayer is inviting God into that conversation, believing that he is hearing you, that he cares about you, that he understands you, and then awaiting his insight and direction as to what to do next. That's prayer. And I know, even once you get a good definition of it, there's still probably part of you that's like, yeah, but what is it actually going to do? I mean, does prayer do anything? Are we just talking to ourselves? What is actually happening there? And according to James, prayer actually does a lot, more than we normally Imagine. This is what he goes on to say in James chapter 5, verse 14. Are any of you sick? Call for the elders of the church to come pray over you, and the Lord will make you well. If you've sinned, ask for forgiveness, confess to each other, and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. I have that line underlined in all the Bibles that I have, and you end up acquiring a lot as a pastor, okay? The earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. I wonder what our lives would look like if we actually believed that. There's this invitation from James to pray in a couple different types of ways, right? To pray ourselves, about ourselves, and to also invite other people to pray for us and to pray for them as well. And here's what we don't like about this. In order to actually get somebody to pray for you, you have to tell them what's going on with you. And that's not always something I want to do, right? Because when you start thinking about what that might entail, you're like, that is really going to crumble the facade that I've built. I mean, I don't really want to go there. Most of us, we want to post the highlights, not publicize our hidden battles. But unfortunately, what James is saying is listen, if you are anxious, if you're experiencing hardship, if you are suffering in life, even if that suffering is this mental anxiety you carry everywhere, you need to know that peace does not come from pretending that you're perfect, but from sharing your struggles with safe people. And all the more so if those safe people know God and know you and will bring your needs to God for you. There's something powerful happening here. And James genuinely believed that prayer is powerful and changes things. And I think part of the reason why he believed that was because he grew up Jewish in a tradition in which there were certain prayer practices that everybody sort of built their life around. And also there was a handful of stories about the power of prayer that he grew up hearing that would have made him think man, if God could do it then for them, he can do it now for me. And I want to just sort of bring you in on one of these stories because I think it gives us insight into the reason that James thinks the way he does and says the things that he says. It's a story found in the book of Daniel, and weirdly, it's about this guy named Daniel, so the book's named appropriately. And to give you some background, essentially, Daniel is this guy. He's really, really intelligent, and his people are conquered by this neighboring nation, Babylon, and all of the best and the brightest of that nation are drug off, and they are basically enslaved to the Babylonians. And those who are really bright are brought in and educated and put in service of the king. And so Daniel is one of the top advisors to the king, and he's really successful, and the king really likes him, which makes a lot of other people that wanted that job hate him because they're like, I'm from here. I grew up here. This is I should have that job. So they decided to do something that I'm sure never happens at where you work. They decide to destroy him. And so they con the king basically to passing this law saying that it's illegal to pray. And if you do, and you're caught, you are going to be fed to lions. There's a 30-day window, which is, you got to admit, is a very creative way to punish someone. And so, of course, they're watching Daniel at all times, and he prays because it's sort of his thing, his habit. And they grab him and they drag him before the king. And when he arrives and they're like, we found him praying, it's suddenly it occurs to the king for the first time, oh no, I made a stupid decision that now is going to wreak havoc on one of my best friends, and I can't not uphold the law or else these people won't respect me as the leader. And that's sort of where the story picks up with us. Daniel chapter 6, verse 16 says this, so the king gave orders for Daniel to be thrown into a den of lions, saying, may the God you serve rescue you. And then a stone was placed over the den. The king and his nobles sealed it so no one could rescue Daniel. Then the king returned to his palace. He couldn't eat. He refused any entertainment, and he couldn't sleep all night. Which means we have something in common with him. And I think when you and I are in this place and we can't sleep at night because there's so much anxiety rattling around in us, I think for most of us, the first thought is, well, you know what would solve my anxiety? Just this situation being fixed. Like, if I could just get this or achieve that, or somehow that person just disappears, I don't want to kill them. I just want them to not be, you know? Don't pretend like you've not thought that before. And like, man, if that could happen, then my life would be virtually stressless. But the reality of this guy's life is he has everything that you could ever want. He has all of the money and the riches and the respect and the authority to pretty much say and do anything he wants to, and yet he is stressed out of his mind. Because the truth is, that this is pointing to, and you need to know this morning, you will never arrive in a magical set of circumstances completely free from stress. Because everything has its thing. If you could eject from this place in your life and go somewhere else and have a different set of circumstances, guess what? That'd be stressful too, for different reasons that you probably aren't thinking of right now. Remember when you were a little bit younger and you were like, if I was just an adult, wouldn't have all these parents stressing me out. And then you got a little bit older and you're like, sucks to be an adult. Wish I could go back to being a kid. They're stressed here too. But, maybe later on in life, things will de-stress. And then you have kids and you're like, this is worse. It just keeps piling up, right? Like, no matter what tax bracket you're in, what situation you're in, what relationship you're in, everything has its stress. So the question isn't, am I going to have stress, or even how do I get out of this stress, but how do I deal with stress? How do I respond to stress? And, for this king, he seemingly could do whatever he wants to, but he can still make dumb decisions with the power that he has. And he's like pacing the floor because he's like, wait a minute, did I just accidentally make a dumb law that's going to get one of my best friends eaten alive by lions? Like, I don't know if I can live with myself if that actually happens. And he's sort of freaking out. But what is Daniel doing? And the text, at least in this part of the story, doesn't tell us exactly what Daniel's doing in that moment because he's hidden in this lion's den. But I would guess, if I had to, based on his entire rest of his story and life, I would guess that he's praying in this moment. Because when you look at Daniel, that's pretty much his response to everything, including the stress that comes from a bunch of people who hate you being like, if you pray, we're going to murder you, nerd. I think for a lot of us, we would have been like, you know what? It's time to take a break from praying. I don't want to die being ripped apart by lions while I'm looking at my own intestines. That's not how I want to go. But this is what Daniel does to that very stressful situation. It says this, Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. When Daniel learned that the law had been signed forbidding him to do this thing, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with his windows open toward Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to God. So Daniel encounters like a massive stress that a lot of us have not actually been faced with. And he doesn't panic, he doesn't pace, he doesn't spin out, he doesn't freak out. Everyone else that he knows around him is just like talking about this new law and like, man, this country's really gone to hell in a handbasket. Nobody's safe anymore. Can you believe it? We got to rise up and do something. And Daniel, although he's feeling the same stress as these other people, instead of panicking, he prays. And it gives us hints in this text as to why he does that. Because he has a pattern of it. It says he prays just as he had always done, 3 times a day as usual. Because here's the truth. Whatever disciplines you develop when things are good, you will default to when things are bad. Right? When things fall apart in life, people don't respond the way they want to. They react according to what they're used to. And this is why for many of us, we don't pray immediately when the world falls apart, right? Because if you are actually honest about your life, you're like, man, when things are good, I like to go out and drink. And when things are bad, I drink more. Right? When things are bad, you don't share it with people because you're convinced that they don't care about you, and so you isolate, and when things are bad, you double down and you completely disappear. And nobody even knows you're struggling. And you just descend into a den of depression. But Daniel, he prayed regularly when things were good, and so when things were really bad, his natural response was to pray then too, even harder. And maybe you're looking at this with a critical mind and you're just like, okay, I mean, good for him, but let's be real, it didn't really work out that great because he still got thrown in a den of lions. And I think the reason why we push back in this way is because we have a fundamental misunderstanding of what prayer is and how it works. Because the reality is, prayer is not a passcode in life that guarantees immunity. And I want you to hear that. Prayer is not a passcode that guarantees immunity. It doesn't help you avoid all the lions in your life. It changes how you feel about them and how you face them. It's not this escape hatch out of chaos. It is an anchor in the midst of it. And if you don't understand that this is the purpose of prayer, you will be frustrated that you feel like God is not answering your prayers. And you'll give up before you have experienced a breakthrough. Now, I know this is like a really ancient story, and you're just like, what does this have to do with me? Like, I'm not best friends with any kings, and I've never been threatened by a lion attack, okay? But here's the reality. You have your own lions. Like, think of it this way. One of the very first disciples and best friends of Jesus, Peter, he wrote this in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. He says, watch out for your great enemy, the devil, who prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. And I think as we're walking through this story, I think it is helpful when you're trying to figure out what does this have to do with me, to think about Daniel's lions metaphorically, like Peter does it, so he gives us permission to do the same. And what are they a metaphor for? I think they're a metaphor for the frightening things that seek to devour you. And when you think about what is it to devour something or someone, it's to overwhelm and consume them. That sounds like anxiety to me. I wonder if you are honest with yourself, what fears are on the verge of overwhelming and consuming you right now? Those are your lions. Those are the things that are seeking to devour you. And according to Peter and Daniel, you are going to have to face them. But you don't have to live in fear of them. So how do you escape being fearful in the face of the thing that makes you nervous and anxious? This is Peter's advice. A verse before, he says this, give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares about you. And I would say that is what prayer is. It's giving your worries and cares to God in conversation with him. It's this process of, even with the little things in your life, regularly giving those worries to God, and then when the big things come along to overwhelm you, your natural response will be to give those things to God as well, because it becomes your pattern in life. And maybe you're wondering, like, well, how much prayer is that going to take, like, to build that kind of a pattern? Like, how much prayer do we need? I mean, I'm kind of a busy person, right? I mean, if you look at the life of Daniel, he prays like 3 times a day, okay? Which sounds like a lot, especially right now if you're just like, listen, I might be more in like the 0 times a day category, okay? So 3 a day sounds like a lot, but at least it's less than what the New Testament authors suggest. Listen to this. This is in a letter to one of the first churches, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 16. Paul writes this, never stop praying. Now some of you are like, well, that's way more than 3 a day. I'm like, I'm not good at math, but I know that much. Never stop praying. Always be joyful. Be thankful in all circumstances. How is that even possible? Like, what is this guy even talking about? And what you need to understand is that the way that Paul sees prayer is that it is not a moment, it's a mindset. It's a mindset that revolves around these three things: processing everything with God, fixating on the good, and expressing your gratitude. And Paul thinks that you should do these things so much, that you should commit so much of your mental space to these things that you get so used to them that they become as natural to you as breathing itself. And there's actually a name for this kind of prayer. And it's mentioned multiple times in the Bible. I'll read you an excerpt from a songwriter from the Old Testament. This is what he calls it. Psalm 119, verse 15, he says this: I will meditate on your principles and contemplate your ways. So this is the version of prayer that he's telling us is so powerful: meditation. Because the truth is, meditation or contemplation is the deepest form of prayer. And essentially what it is turning something over and over in your mind, dwelling on or obsessing over it. And it is the process through which you reorient your thoughts and you renew your mind, which is something that Scripture tells us to do over and over again. So if you are sort of convinced that prayer doesn't work, but the only type of prayers that you have ever prayed are sort of these mindless, quick little prayers before a meal because you feel like you have to, or before a road trip to pray for a hedge of protection, even though you're like, bushes around this car are not going to protect us from a semi, okay? Or maybe for you, it's sort of like this little wimpy prayer that you pray, kind of a Hail Mary before a test or a job interview. I got to tell you, you need to wade out a little bit deeper, because meditation is what brings about transformation. Now, I can feel some of you feeling really uncomfortable right now. Your butt cheeks are clenched. You feel sick to your stomach. You're like, meditation? I thought this was a Christian church. What are we talking about right now? We lost another pastor to the New Agers. I knew it was going to happen. Can't trust anybody anymore. But I think this is because we fundamentally misunderstand what this is, and we don't know our biblical history. The Bible commands us to meditate, but at the same time, you should know that not all meditation is the same. Like, for instance, Buddhist meditation is essentially about emptying your mind, but Christ-centered meditation is about filling your mind with the truth, love, and goodness of God. And the reason this is important to note is because whatever you meditate on, you become like. So if you fill your mind with nothing, you become nothing. I mean, I don't know if that's your goal. That is the actual goal of Buddhism, is to become nothing. But I don't think you want to be empty. Some of us, that's how we already feel. I think what you want to be is full of the truth, love, and goodness of God, that when people bump up against you, what comes out of you is truth, love, and goodness that looks exactly like Jesus himself. And when you begin to make this your mindset, your entire life begins to become your prayer life, because you're in constant conversation and communion with God. And that's what it means to never stop praying. And let's face it, if you have a problem with meditation, this is what you should already know. You are already meditating on something. You are already turning something over and over in your mind. It just might not be something that is helpful or healthy. I have spent time talking to people in my office who come in and they're just like, I'm so stressed out, so much anxiety. And I'm just like, I want to recommend some Christ-centered meditation. Oh, I don't believe in meditation. I'm like, you're already doing it. What is it that you are turning over and over in your mind? Because everything you just told me, it is, I'm afraid of this, I'm nervous about this, I'm anxious about this, I can't stop thinking about this horrible thing that might happen. That's meditation. It's self-destructive meditation. Anxiety is prayer pointed in the wrong direction. Instead of inviting God into that exchange, you're trying to do it all on your own. I think if you're doing this, this is why you're anxious. This is why you can't sleep. But it's not just going to go away. Because the truth is, when it comes to a destructive mindset, you can't just erase it. You have to replace it. You can't just be like, you know what, don't think about that anymore. And your brain will be like, well, now it's all I can think about. You have to give it something better to think about, something more noble to think about, to obsess over, to consume it. And that takes time and intentionality, which is why when James hears about people like you and me who are deep in like anxious like moments where we can't sleep and we're panicked about where our life is going to go and what is going to happen to us and our kids and our country, like it's why he says like, hey, you should pray. And he is not talking about a 2-minute prayer before you go to bed. He is talking about meditation. He's talking about processing everything that you are experiencing with God and fixating on the good and expressing your gratitude until this cycle of thinking becomes as natural to you as breathing. Because that's how you overcome anxiety. And I have never, ever met anyone who consistently devotes themselves to this kind of prayer who says prayer doesn't work. I've never met that person. So what does it look like? This is always one of my frustrations when I grew up in church. People are like, you should do this. And I'll be like, yeah, it sounds good, Pastor. I don't know how. And so I'm going to give you this is just some real ways that I do this, like when I'm trying to meditate. One thing I do is I will just pick a verse, usually from the life of Jesus, and I will read it over and over and over again. Not like a massive passage, but just an idea. And I'll read that idea, and I'll read it again, and I'll read it again, I'll read it again until it sort of burns into my brain. And then I'll walk around and usually take a walk outside, and I'll just say it over and over again to myself. And then I will ask myself this question: if I really believed this, what would I do with it? Because here's the thing I think is true about a lot of us. We say we believe the Bible, but we don't behave like it. And what you believe is how you behave. So if you claim you believe something and it doesn't actually play out in your actions, you don't believe it. And here's the reality. Most of us do not live like we believe the things Jesus says are true. Which is why we need these moments of meditation to actually confront ourselves and say, like, if I actually believed this, how would I be living right now? What would I be doing with my time and my money and my thought processes? Would I make a different decision here? That's deep-end meditation that will rewire your brain. Another way I do it is, especially if I'm in just like a negative spiral, I have a notes tab in my phone I do this with. I will, again, usually walk around to get myself moving, and I will just start brainstorming everything I can think of in my life that is evidence that God cares about me and is looking out for me. And I list everything. Because here's the reality. When you're in an anxious spiral, don't you freak out about everything? What if you reverse that? And I just start putting everything in there. I am so grateful for fans. It is so hot. Man, I wouldn't be able to sleep without a fan. God, thank you so much for this fan. I don't just like name it. I thank God for it. I give him credit for all of the good things in my life. Yesterday, I was walking around. I kind of spun out on this like, I am so grateful that I was born in a time with indoor plumbing. Man, I don't think I could survive without it. I've read too much history. I'll be like, you know what? It is too weird and stinky around here. I'm too much of a germaphobe. God is like, we can't push this person into existence until later on. This is not going to work for them. The people, the situations, the little things. And I just begin to flood my mind with all of the things that God has given me that make my life incredible. And it keeps me from getting hung up on the one or two things that I feel like he should fix. Another way that I meditate is this. I will imagine, I'll think of somebody who is really frustrated or offended or annoyed me. And I will ask myself this question. I wonder what they are going through that would make them say or do that. God, what are they going through right now? And I will begin to just think about that and try and get into the headspace with God about what it might feel like to be that person. And I will invite God to give me compassion for them, because nobody does anything randomly or in a vacuum. It comes from somewhere. And why are we bumping into each other? Maybe this thing isn't personal. Maybe they got their own stuff going on. And I allow God to give me compassion. And just instead of meditating on the opposite, which is like, I hate them, they're so frustrating, why would they do something like that? God, you got to kill them. Of inviting God to give me understanding and compassion for them. These are just a few ways I do it. And I don't know which one of these Daniel did. Maybe he did his own version completely, but I do know this: prioritizing prayer produces peace. Prioritizing prayer produces peace in our lives. And not just the passing kind of peace, not just a little bit, a deep, otherworldly peace. The Apostle Paul described it like this. He said in Philippians chapter 4, verse 6, don't worry about anything, instead pray about everything. And then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. And his peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. And so what does that kind of peace, the peace that surpasses human, what does that actually look like in real life? And I think we see this in Daniel's story. This is what happens in verse 19 of chapter 6 of Daniel. Early the next morning, the king hurried to the lion's den. And when he got there, he called out, Daniel, was your God able to rescue you? And Daniel answered, long live the king. He's in like way too cheery of a mood. My God sent an angel to shut the lions' mouths. The king was overjoyed and ordered Daniel to be lifted up from the den. Not a scratch was found on him. So I want you to think about this for a minute. Daniel is still sitting in a hole with hungry lions. And instead of cowering in anxiety, he is actually really cheery and positive and at peace. And then he gets lifted out. This is important for you to understand. Daniel doesn't experience peace when he's away from the lions. Daniel experiences peace in the midst of the lions. Why would not that be what God wants to do for you too? Because the reality that I think this shows us is that peace is not the absence of problems. It is an awareness of the presence of God. It is not that I don't have anything that's overwhelming, anything that's seeking to consume me, any frustration, any fear that I don't have to face anymore. The reality of it is I'm still in the midst of it, but God is with me. And God loves me. And God is looking out for me. And God has goodness on the horizon for me. And he can be trusted. And I wonder if you've ever seen this in real life, where somebody had peace because of the presence of God, even though problems were closing in on every side. I think of a lot of moments like this connected to my grandpa. My grandpa passed a few years ago, but after my grandma died, I used to go stay with my grandpa every once in a while, and he would go on these morning prayer walks. And I always wanted to go with him because it seemed exciting. And then I was like, this guy's just talking to himself. This is weird. But it was still kind of interesting. And it was fun to try and keep up with him because he was fast. And this one day we were walking around, and there was these kids in this park that we passed. And I don't know, I was really young, so they looked like maybe they're high school, college age, and they looked really rough. And they started like yelling threats and stuff, and we weren't really responding. And so they started coming towards us, and they had like these pieces of I don't know, some fruit or something that fell off a tree, and they started throwing them at us and cursing and stuff. And I remember just getting really, really scared. And my grandpa looking at him like when you're a kid, you always look to the adults around you like, how are we supposed to be afraid right now? And my grandpa was just so calm. And he took me by the hand, and he just turned around and walked me back to his house. And he was like, hey, stay here. And then he went to the freezer and he grabbed out, remember those push pops or the orange push-ups? And he grabbed a whole bunch of those. It's like 9 a.m. He grabs all these things and then walks out. I'm standing by the window watching him. He walks out and across the road into the park and calls out to the guys. And I just see him, he's handing out push pops. I'm like, I can't even eat those. And you're giving it to him for breakfast? They're the bad guys. What is going on right? he's handing them out, and I see them talking, and I see him laughing, and then they're laughing, and then whatever, and then he walks back. He shakes their hand, and he walks back. And he gets back, and I'm like, what happened? And he was like, well, I gave them, they really enjoyed the push pops. And that when I first was walking up, they were yelling at me and still saying stuff. And I was like, oh, I just want to give you this. And you guys okay? And talked to them for a while. And he's like, before I left, they said, we still don't like you, old man. But these push pops are delicious. And I was like, that was the... And when I think back on the story, I think like, how was my grandpa able to be like this in so many different situations? And I think the secret to that is actually hidden in the story itself, because he began his every day by getting up as usual, like he always did, and took a walk that he, in his mind, perceived to be having with God. And he processed everything with God. And in those conversations, he fixated on the good. And in those conversations, he expressed his gratitude to the God from whom all good things come. And then when things crept up in his life that felt overwhelming, he faced them and felt about them differently than if this was not his routine. Because in so many ways, he was just like Daniel. And I don't know if when you hear things like this, a story like my grandpa's or a story like Daniel's, you're like, man, that's so incredible. But here's the thing. The stories about your life can sound like this too. You actually have the ability within you to build new stories that are full of peace and compassion and love, even when you're not receiving that. You can prayerfully become this person little by little over time. And one day, like Daniel, when something happens that is scary and stressful and unexpected, you will notice that because you've laid down this new pattern of prayer in your life, that your natural response is to take it to God instead of hang on to it and be anxious about it in your own soul. While everyone around you is freaking out, you will discover that you're at peace, and you will go home and you will sleep like a baby. So here's your homework. I want to encourage you, if you don't write anything else down today, don't take a picture of anything, to take this one thing with you. Because if you do this, it will change your entire life. I want you to write down this meditation pattern. I want you to put it somewhere prominent, and I want you to make it your mindset. Put this wherever you find yourself getting anxious most often. Maybe it's on a piece of paper in your pocket. Maybe it's on the dashboard of your car, on your computer at work. Some of you might need to staple it to your boss's head. Whatever. But have it handy and leverage it as this reminder that this is what you do to keep your life on track, to process everything with God, to fixate on the good, and to express your gratitude. And I will guarantee you that if you feel yourself becoming anxious and worried and frustrated and you don't know what to do and you feel like everything is all ending, I would guarantee you that it's because you are not doing this. And it will cue you to slow down and to begin to process with God, to request that He show you what is good, and to express your gratitude to Him and those around you. And when you do this, you will find peace. I think you will discover what James described and Daniel clearly experienced, that prayer is how we calm down. That prayer is how we focus on what matters most. That prayer is how we experience healing in our mind and in our body. It is how we get access to the good life. It's how we transform our minds. It's how we finally get a good night's sleep. And that's what I want to pray into your life today. Would you bow your heads across this room? God, I know you see every person in this place. I know you see their life, their heart, their struggle, their worries. God, I know you know exactly what every person in here walked in with and the exhaustion that they walked in with. And God, I pray that you would begin to change who we are and how we experience our lives. by helping us to prioritize. The kind of prayer that doesn't just occupy a single moment of our day, but that begins to take over our mindset. A deep meditation in which we process everything with you, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in which we fixate on what is good in our life. We notice things that we have been ignoring, in which we express how grateful we are to you and the people around us for the goodness that has come our way. And God, I pray that as we do these things, that we would experience our blood pressure dropping, our bodies calming, our minds settling, our relationships coming back to life. God, that we would experience a deep peace, even when surrounded by lions, a peace that surpasses all human understanding, because it is not from another person. It is not circumstantial. It is from you. Make it so. In Jesus' name, amen.